Dr. Jazz.
Man, I'll just jump in. I just
Yeah,
checked today on Bandcamp that you'll have a new one out
I do.
in September,
Yeah.
and I listened to number two a lot and the previous stuff, the new Mellow
Oh, cool.
Edwards. I love that stuff. But yeah, I wanted to ask you about the new one. It's kind of a continuation of what you've been doing, and if you can lead me, how do you construct these compositions? It's like really all over the place, but it's all makes sense also.
Well, yeah, similar to the outcome, the input also involves a lot of different ways of putting things together. Like sometimes I put things together kind of in a sample-based world, where I'll just, especially in Ableton, I'll just sort of jam with myself and come up with different loops or feels. And then sometimes I just compose a piece of music, and if it seems like it's something I can pull off in a, I guess, non-jazz setting, like a lot of these tunes could be jazz tunes, and actually I have a band that plays a lot of the tunes.
Oh, really? I wanted to ask you that, yeah, if you do that live also, this one.
Yeah, and so, yeah, this is sort of the interesting part of it for me, is creating music that's sort of transcends languages, or ultimately gets to whatever my language is, and I can present it in a variety of different ways, and it still has consistency.
Yeah.
Yeah, with the original, how I conceive. Yeah, that's pretty much it. It's also, I write songs on guitar, I write songs on the piano.
Oh, okay, I wanted to ask you that.
Actually, back when the Mellow Edwards was more active, my philosophy was to write songs on the bass first.
Oh, really? Okay.
And electric bass, so I would try and just think from the bottom up.
Yeah.
So it's kind of fun. And then the other part of it is just like some of these pieces are years old, and I'll come up with something I like and not know what to do with it, and then occasionally revisit it. So it's sort of, it's like very slowly building something, and you leave it and you come back and it looks like something else, and then you go with that.
Yeah.
There's just billions of versions of all my songs.
That's good.
Another thing I love to do is editing. Like I think it's an art form, and there's this guy,
Yeah.
Walter Murch. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
No.
He was editor for a lot of oh shoot, who did The Godfather? Who was the director?
Oh, Coppola? No, it's not him, right?
Coppola. Well, he worked a lot with Coppola.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And so he has some really great books just about film editing, and he also does sound editing, and just some of his philosophies I find really interesting as it applies to music. Just montage or points of view, and how you can create something out of hardly anything just by your timing.
Yeah.
And what voices play what at what point.
Yeah.
So
yeah. When you play this music live, where does it go? Because when I listen to the recordings, it's like you said, a lot of electronics, lots of.
Yeah.
But when you play live, what happens there actually?
I've tried to do this with electronics, and it just feels what's the word, disgenuine.
Okay.
Not like cheating, but standing there with your computer on a stage is, especially when you're used to playing trombone and guitar, it's a little bit of a letdown for me.
Yeah.
So right now I have a band that's myself, an electric bassist, drummer, and lap steel.
Oh,
and
wow.
I play trombone and guitar, and we play mostly Curha music, although we play some covers. I mean, it's a wide variety of stuff, but the idea is I'm presenting it as just music and not tied to whatever textures were originally there.
Yeah, interesting.
So,
oh man, I have to hear this live. Well, I mean, it's like I checked on YouTube and I didn't see any footage yet.
You know what? We played last week, and there actually is something on YouTube, but you probably don't know about it. Like the guy posted up, so I'll send it to you.
Oh, please, yeah, I really want to see. I mean, hear and see how this sounds live, because, like, you know, this the new one, this B1 track that's available just for free for now, B Alley. You know, a tune like this, how this sounds live. I'm really curious.
That's actually one of the tunes we play.
Oh wow, okay.
That one's actually a tremendous amount of fun to play live.
Can you imagine?
But yeah, I mean, some of this comes from my being a kid and watching. I don't know if you know PBS, public broadcasting. It's like I guess it's sort of the government-owned television station.
We had that in Yugoslavia, yeah. Okay.
Non-commercial, is not necessarily a mouthpiece for the government, but more about advertisers are not determining what you see. Anyways, there was, I can't remember her name, a famous classical pianist, and she was demonstrating how Chopin on different keyboards just doesn't work. But the way Bach wrote, you could play it on any keyboard and it would sound really cool. I mean, it would sound like Bach. And that was always sort of this back of my mind goal, is to be able to create music that, you know, could sound good with a string quartet or a punk rock drummer and guitarist.
Yeah.
And the guy.
Yeah. Where did this come from for you? You know, you said, you know, you don't want to be like kind of, I don't think you are actually like genre limited. Like, where does this wide interest come from when you were a kid? I mean, like exposure to music, like the earlier, or let's say jazz, when did this happen?
Well, I mean, actually when I was in my teens, jazz was everything. And then this was like the early 80s, I started discovering other music around the time I went to college. Or I never really gave up on like the Talking Heads. I always liked the Talking Heads.
Yeah. Cool.
So I always knew that, you know, it wasn't exclusively about being a jazz musician. But yeah, it's that Duke Ellington thing. Music is either good or bad. It doesn't matter.
I love that. Yeah.
And I think New England Conservatory is pretty fertile ground for getting a large worldview with their third stream department. Like I had a class in Turkish music and lots of things like that. So, you know, it's always been around. Yeah.
What about jazz trombone? Like when did that happen? Like who was the player that you said like, okay, I want to play trombone and jazz actually improv? I mean,
well, that's a kind of a weird. I have a weird relationship because with the trombone, I played the trombone, and actually I played the guitar. I started them around the same time.
Oh, really? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I wanted to ask you about this. You know, because you and Jeb Bishop, I think he also plays guitar, right?
Oh, I didn't know that.
I think so. Yeah, on Ken Vandermark's records, and I'm really curious about this duality of you. You know, I've heard you with Chris Lightcap, and you're an incredible guitar player and a trombone player. Like, how did this story? I mean, you wanted to tell now, like it's happened actually.
Well, I'll finish up my other thing about the trombone.
Yeah, please.
In that I played trombone before I got into jazz, and so there was the jazz that I really, really loved. Rarely involved a trombonist, except for maybe J.J. Johnson. So I had no real trombone heroes, sadly. And that today more than I used to. I'm much more of an appreciator of all the trombonists. But back in the day, I would just be, they could be better, you know, super hypercritical. But yeah, the guitar thing and the trombone thing to me is also really interesting because you're a guitarist?
Yeah.
Okay. So the fretboard is kind of like the slide, like every, you have these increments that you have pitches, and they're sort of reverse. As you go out with the slide, you go lower. Whereas if you, well, I guess if you go out with a guitar, you also go lower.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the wind instruments or brass instruments are in partials. It's more about what's going on here to determine the fundamental pitch that you're playing. So I see those as strings, like, just, I guess, subconsciously. Some, in the same way that you get patterns on a fretboard, you also have patterns on the slide and partial diagram. I don't know if there's a word for that. And so, I've always kind of visualized them in similar ways. So I went to school for jazz trombone. It was either that or I was thinking of being a classical guitar major. And then I just gave up the guitar. And then while I was at NEC, somebody turned me on to James Brown and the Meters.
Oh man, yeah.
When I decided to get a guitar again, because I wanted to play in a rhythm section. Because playing in a horn section in a band like that is kind of fun, but once you've played jazz, it's a much more, you're much more part of what's going on when you're improvising. So playing in a horn section, it's like playing in a Broadway pit orchestra or something. Whereas playing in a guitar in a burning rhythm section is a lot more engaging. So that's did we catch up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you feel comfortable? Like, I mean, let's say in the beginning, when you kind of started, were you comfortable equally on both, like on a gig, or like when did you start introducing guitar, like on professional jazz gigs?
Well, I don't really play jazz on the guitar. It's
I mean, like, let's say Chris's stuff is kind of, I mean,
weird
it's
rock,
weird
jazz.
Rock, something Lightcap music.
I mean, it's taken me a lot longer time with the guitar because I don't, and it's kind of intentional, I don't have the same jazz facility. Which leads to, not being able to execute everything I hear. So I have to sort of outthink myself. And if I'm not comfortable, that's difficult. Whereas with the trombone, I don't have to think about it, although the guitar is catching up.
No, I love that, especially in that band. It's so cool what you do, because you're like a contrast. It's like, you create this different world actually with what you play. And I mean, that's about, Jonathan is completely different than you, of course, and I love that. So that's so beautiful.
It's a lot of fun. The last one we did actually was me and Brandon Seabrook.
Seabrook. Yeah, exactly.
And that was also, I mean, that was even more extreme, but tremendous amount of fun.
I love those guys. But I wanted to ask you about, you mentioned NEC, and when I think of the New York scene and like late 80s or early 90s, when I speak to the players, like the downtown scene was so amazingly creative. And how was it like for you, when you left college and entered New York as a trombone player? Like, I know you did either orchestra stuff, but like, entering the scene, what were the first connections you established?
Well, there was a whole bunch of us that left Boston in probably a 1 to 2 year period. So there was like John Medeski and Josh Roseman.
Oh yeah, exactly. Josh is also,
Josh and I, we really go back. We were the two trombonists at NEC from like 1986, and kind of the two creative trombonists in Boston, I would say. I hope I'm not forgetting anybody that would be offended that I forgot them. But like we were sort of in all the bands that, were kind of edgy. I actually replaced him in the Either Orchestra because he went and traveled Europe with Porgy and Bess.
Oh really? Oh man, wow.
I mean, this is that would have been 1986.
Okay.
So yeah, Josh Fuzinski, Chris Speed was at NEC. I met Jim Black through him, and
Yeah, sure, you're all.
through them eventually, well, and Andrew D'Angelo, and then through them I met Oscar Noriega, who was my first roommate when I moved to New York City. And yeah, and then there was this house. Oscar and I were on the top floor. Crispy, Jim Black, Andrew D'Angelo, various other people. I think Kung Wu, no, not Kung Wu. I replaced him in Oscar's place. Like it was, it was definitely a community there. So that was my getting into New York City.
Yeah.
And that's right when the Knitting Factory, old one closed and the new one opened. So there was sort of excitement about downtown jazz getting this giant new space.
Yeah.
Multiple stages.
Well, remember the first professional jazz gig that you got in New York? I mean, like
first professional jazz gig? Well, I mean, there were some gigs where the Either Orchestra went down to play in New York City.
Okay.
And so I think our first gig actually was we replaced Gil Evans on a Monday night at Sweet Basil.
Ooh, okay.
Because Gil Evans, I guess, had decided not to do that Monday or something. It was just sort of a happenstance. And that was mega exciting. Play Sweet Basil.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that'd probably be the first one. And then yeah, by the time I officially moved to New York City, I'd played a bunch of gigs there. Because I also, between Boston and New York, I got a master's degree in New Jersey. So I was sort of going in and out of the city here and there through that.
Yeah. Was it, if you look at the scene back now, like, was it easier in a sense, or like, of course you were younger and like, in a sense, like getting gigs, many times I hear now clubs are closing and like.
It's kind of generational.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Like, there's a bunch of 20-somethings right now that are playing way more than I am in places I've never heard of, because places are constantly opening up. But it's the scene is a lot more what's the word, where it's all spread out. Like, it used to be the Knitting Factory or Tonic or, a handful of clubs that everybody would play at. Now it's just places all over. And it used to also be sort of centered more, I'm talking more downtown. There was always a jazz scene in Brooklyn. Downtown scene was more centered in Manhattan. And now it's, I would say even more in Brooklyn, actually, but still in Manhattan. Like there's a Stone and a variety of other places. So it's just less centered, more spread out, more, I would say fractured. I mean, because back in the day, I would hang out with like the older generation, like Mark Dresser and, Tim Byrne and those guys. And, there was a lot more of everybody being in one place. And it feels a little less like that now. But it's still, I have to say, still pretty vibrant.
Sure.
The other night when my band played, we were on the bill with a band of people. Actually, I'd met the guitar player before, but I'd never met pretty much the whole band before. And they must have been in their late 20s, early 30s. And they were great and a lot of fun and doing exactly, the kind of stuff I would have been doing then.
Yeah.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah, no, I'm always interested in that. I talked to, I don't know, Elliot Sharp and Bobby Pravitt and that generation, and they were like, talking about the early 80s and late 70s, how incredibly vibrant the scene was, even the 80s.
I mean, I think they're right. And some of that is that scene was new. Like, it's like when you talk about bebop in the 1950s and,
loft
at
scene
the
or
time,
something. Yeah,
it was a lot edgier, and it was newer to the whole world, so they were able to just like travel everywhere, and also the economics were a lot better, you know, because basically you still make the same amount of money you made then, which is horrific. Actually, the pandemic helped that a little bit, I think. But so there is that, the economic aspect of it. It was just easier, I think, to really get by.
Yeah,
but
it's bizarre. Like we talked about this in Slovenia. Like the smaller gigs are also, it's the same as the last 15 years. You know, it's still about the same amount. I mean, not talking about festivals or stuff, but like, you know, smaller gigs. It's like, yeah, you got this and this. I'm like, man, it's what's happening. You know, it's bizarre. And New York is the same. Yeah, it's like bizarre.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, you know, most people have caught up, and many clubs have caught up with the idea that before it was a $10 cover, and you don't make any money with a $10 cover, even if you pack a house. And so pretty much most places now, after the pandemic, just doubled it, and it's 20, and nobody, you know, people don't care. They'll pay 20 also. Because $10 is like a muffin and coffee at this point. And, you know, the value of that compared to value of seeing some live music is way out of whack.
Yeah.
So, but I tell people ask me to play in New York City, and I mean, my philosophy basically is I don't play clubs in New York City to make money, you know, because it's so low. It's just kind of a joke. I mean, obviously, I would like to make the money.
You know, I wanted to ask you, you mentioned all this community of players like Andrew D'Angelo and Chris and all these, you know, Jim Black. And I checked some records that I have you on. It's like Jerry Granelli's, and I love the record with Bobby Pravitt, that one, Too Close to the Pole, I think. And it's kind of the same guys like Jamie and, you know, Andrew. And how did all these records happen? Like, you know, and playing especially, let's say, with Jerry, who like passed away sadly, or like with Bobby, I guess, who traveled a lot in Europe in the 90s. How was it like for you in that period?
Well, that was the exciting time of arriving in New York and immediately landing some pretty cool gigs that involved traveling and recording. That was sort of the living the dream.
Who was the first time you went to Europe with? Like, was it with Bobby, like, actually, that you, or no, or like you know, not with either orchestra, but like smaller groups?
Yeah, it was with Bobby.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was fun. That was a really exciting band, as you can imagine. Between, was it Andrew Kung?
Yeah, Andy Laster.
Yeah, I have to say that, I mean, Bobby was thrilled, especially the first tour, and we were just giving blood every night. It's like, go for it or die. But that was a good band.
Yeah, I love that. I love Andy Laster. Yeah, we have a scheduled talk in September with Andy. You know, I'm such a huge fan, and I love the stuff he did in the 90s and, you know, later.
Yeah.
Now I really have to ask him what he's doing now. Why is he's not, you know, making records anyway? Yeah, just the detour.
Yeah, I love Hydra. Hydra was a really cool band.
Yeah.
I actually subbed in Hydra. I would be the person that subbed for Herb Robertson.
Really?
Hydra. Yeah. That was some of the hardest music I've played.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was Tom Rainey and Drew Gress. And
I love those guys. I think one of my first European tours I did in a trio with Tom and Drew, and that was like,
oh really?
Man, yeah, it was just like, man, like as if I had gone those 10 days through 6 universities of jazz or something, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
oh, they're both amazing.
Blew my mind. I mean, but wow. I mentioned before already, like, you know, the new Mellow Edwards, and how did you decide to become a band leader, and how did that band form? Actually, I love those guys. It's just I played with Hollenbeck a little bit, and I love Trevor and Chris. You hung out with Chris, but like, how did you decide to do that group actually and to do that album?
Well, that was like I think like I go through these periods where I sort of think of it as expansion and contraction, where I've always had a lot of different interests. So I will try a bunch of things and maybe they won't work. And then I will contract and go kind of with what I know are my strengths. And that was a contraction period after I was trying some other, I think more electronic stuff. And I was like, I just want to play with a group of bass drums and saxophone. And I had all this, I started sort of hearing this music and writing it. And those were sort of the natural people that I wanted to play with. And Trevor had just moved to town. And it was just, they're all sort of down with the language that I write in. So it all makes sense. And that's how that happened.
Yeah.
I mean,
were you comfortable in that role, like becoming a band leader? Yeah, in the beginning. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, prior to that, I wrote a lot for the Either Orchestra. And some other situations, and would occasionally lead groups. But at that point, I sort of knew exactly what needed to be done, or better, what didn't need to be done as a band leader. That's the art of it.
Yeah, sure.
Know what to let go.
Yeah. Is that group still kind of alive, or I mean, like, or
not really? Everybody's in different places geographically. So I think that had the biggest impact, like between being in different places, and especially between Trevor and John, even back in the day, it was impossible to book anything because they were just insanely busy, out of town busy, like for months. So so I did what I could for a while, and it was a lot of fun, but it just got exhausting to constantly try and book something.
You did like 3 records, right, with that group? or
And the third one was with it was like I got a grant for it, and I combined it with another band, the Numbers Station record?
With Mary, right? And Chess and
Mary, Moran and Satoshi.
That's such a cool one.
That was a lot of fun too. I do want to do a sequel to that record. Actually but that's like a grant project.
Sure.
Because it's a large group of people.
I'm talking about super busy, right, players. I mean,
exactly.
Well, it would be nice to hear you again in this, like, more acoustic context, like the quartet. I love those groups, man. Like this Mellow Edwards, I listen to that so much,
Oh, cool.
I really like that type of music. It's kind of open and ornetish in a way, but like still composed and odd meters and open stuff, and it's just it's so beautiful. But Curtis, I wanted to ask, I mentioned Chris Lightcap before, like how did you become involved with his band? Like when does your story with Chris begin, actually? I mean,
well, we have kids of similar ages, so I more or less got to know him at a playground in Brooklyn. But I guess he'd heard me play guitar or something, but for a few years he's like, I'm starting a 2-guitar band with you and Jonathan Goldberger. And so we hung out a bunch, we're friends, and then started doing that band. That's a tremendous amount of fun. Kind of like rocking out, but without having to be too macho about it. Or I don't know if that's a good way to put it. Yeah, and actually the drummer, do you know Dan Reeser?
Yeah, sure.
He's the drummer in my quartet right now.
Oh, really? Okay.
But he he was the other element, and I've known him since 1983.
Wow.
We went to the same small university in Ohio for a couple of years before we both headed out east. So he was the other ingredient to Chris's grand plan.
The evil plan. Yeah, I love that group. Were you here when you played in Maribor? In Slovenia? No, right? On the festival?
No, that was probably his other.
That was the smaller group, right?
Big Mouth.
Yeah, Big Mouth. That was the Big Mouth thing. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we haven't actually traveled with that band except for, the Super Big Mouth record.
Yeah.
Played in Guimarães last year.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, that's been it.
You mentioned Dan, the drummer. Like, who are the other players in the last band that you have? I mean, like.
Adam Minkoff is the bassist. Do you know Adam?
No.
He's kind of this crazy musician. He plays bass with a lot of like famous people, but more in the rock world. But he also he sings with Dweezil Zappa.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
Dweezil Zappa, and he's an amazing multi-instrumentalist, and I got to know him, I guess, through the scene, but he was doing this thing where he's recording a different Ennio Morricone piece every week for a year.
Wow.
And so I participated in some of those, but yeah, he's another great creative mind.
I have to check him out. Okay.
A lot of fun to play with as a bassist. And then Raphael McGregor is in the group, and he plays lap steel, and he more of what he does, well, he just had a big gospel, it's called sacred steel thing. There's a whole tradition of gospel music played on the lap steel, and he's kind of into that, but he plays Brazilian music on lap steel.
Might have to check this out.
He started off as a jazz guitarist, moved to New York City, and then just got into steel guitar of all kinds. So he's like somebody who, this was part of my search, trying to figure out somebody that could do what I was hoping for, not really play jazz language on the instrument, but more be able to get into the sound of the instrument, but be able to handle compositions that aren't necessarily, the kind of stuff I would write.
Yeah.
So it's for me, it's kind of a way of limiting myself. Like, it's less about open jazz language, but the tunes automatically throw it there, sort of.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of an ongoing experiment, but it's a lot of fun. And we're going to record in December and have something out next year. So.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you that. Yeah, what are the plans? For the upcoming months. Like if you're writing some new music or going to the studio. So what you kind of answered.
Yeah, going to the studio in December. Like right now, I'm also just self-promoting this new Curha. It's out in 2 days. I'll send you a download link.
Oh, please. Yeah, I mean, I have a radio show also here in Slovenia on national radio.
Okay.
So I would love to present some tracks also. Would be so cool.
Great. And yeah, I'm just like, this is a new thing for me to do, but I'm on the internet looking for similar music that's been reviewed or played on the radio, and trying to find, the person that did that, the reviewer or the radio show, and, sending them an email saying, hey.
You actually found people who do similar music?
Yeah.
Really? Wow, okay.
Well, in the Curha music world, a lot of it is about my own heroes. And in electronic music, I mean, I sort of got into the electronic thing because somebody turned me on to Square Pusher.
Oh, sure. Okay. Yeah.
You know, it's like insane jazz. It's easy to relate to as a jazz musician.
Yeah.
But then being into him, I got into this other guy. He did drum and bass under the name Plug, but also he's British. His name's Luke Vibert. And he, for my money, he's this master orchestrator, and it's a lot. He plays some of the music, but he also uses a lot of samples and a lot of like sound library samples, and just the way he structures everything, it's really elegant and beautiful. And so a lot of my electronic stuff is kind of, I try to think like he does. And then there's also this band, the Meridian Brothers from Colombia.
No, I have to check this out.
Basically, it's one guy, and he plays all the instruments, but he has a band that you know, play his music, and it's kind of electronic. Also, you know, he clearly can compose music, and some of it's highly political, and just really strange, but also super traditional, like super traditional cumbias, but it just sounds like weird new wave music. Anyways, so like,
wow, I have to check it out. Okay.
I'm really into people that sort of can take their culture and turn it into something brand new. And from, you know, for my money, he's like at the top of that list currently. So yeah, a lot of the Curha things, that those are two examples of people who I looked for reviews of, so I could contact, you know. And actually that guy, the guy from the Meridian Brothers, is on the B Alley track playing guitar, and asked him to make a B noise.
Okay, cool. I didn't realize.
I'll send you your B noise.
That's quite cool. But you did the Curha stuff on your own, right? I mean, I know, like, the first one was on Skirl, the new Mellow Edwards thing. Chris's.
Yeah.
But like, working on your own, I wanted to ask you, you know, what's your experience about that nowadays?
This one's going a lot better. The last one, well, the second one, came out basically the day everything shut down during the pandemic was the release date. I remember going to the post office to mail them out, like squirting everything with rubbing alcohol. And then the first one didn't get much publicity. I didn't work it that hard. Like, you know, it's sort of a age/wisdom thing where I'm like, I should just be getting this out there. What am I doing? Why am I doing this if I'm not doing that? I mean, I'm doing it for me because I enjoy it, but you know
what you mean.
It seems that other people enjoy it, so I might as well find the people that would enjoy it. But yeah, and then these three were on I released a bunch of stuff that's on Bandcamp prior to that, but these last three were on a label that's New York City based, called Chant Records. Do you know Janir Blumenkrantz?
Yeah, sure.
Him and John Madoff.
Oh, really? Okay, I didn't know that. Okay.
Abraxas, was that the?
Yeah. They played in my hometown, actually. Yeah.
Okay.
I saw them. Yeah, Janir. And
so my stuff's been coming out on their label. They have a small label that's really, I think, smartly run. You know, not huge distribution. It's mainly about not physical media. It's more about streaming, but you know, I'm printing up CDs to sell on my own or publicity. Yeah. But they just, the deal with the artist is really good, and they're really nice guys and in it for all the right reasons. So
Yeah. I mean, it's funny, like the industry now, it's like really so many people do it on their own, or you know, like in these small run labels, artist run labels, which is, I think it's good, you know. Then so many labels nowadays give you like really bad deals. You have to buy too many CDs, and you're basically, it's just like, you know, really bizarre. And Bandcamp works actually quite cool compared to streaming services, which suck, some of them, but most of them. But you know.
Totally.
So
it's I think it's the age of the small-time entrepreneur. I just read a book about the major labels in the like 60s through the 80s. You know, CBS and Warner and all those, and just the insane amount of corruption, and how people basically, unless you're Michael Jackson, you got stiffed.
Yeah, exactly.
But even I remember hearing about deals with, you know, smaller jazz labels in the 90s, and it was pretty much impossible to break even as an artist. The way they structured it. So
now it's different. Maybe it's, I don't know if it's easier or not, but
it's not.
It's not. It's hard to break even. If you do it on your own, like you do, I think then it's kind of okay. But if you have to pay the studio and the musicians, then it's like, it's
I mean, it's a really fancy business card as I see it.
True. And people don't have CDs anymore. That's another thing. That's CD players. Sorry, that's like, you know, you go on tour in Europe, and then usually people older than 60 buy the CDs. Which
I was under the impression CDs were more prevalent in Europe than in the United States.
Maybe, I mean, on gigs you still sell them. Like if you play in Germany and Austria, Switzerland, actually people really buy them. But not young people. So that's, for me, it's always now a question how to reach the audience around 20, you know, like after a gig. That's, you know, what can they buy or stuff like that.
Well, that's merch. It's important to have something. I actually Curha III, I had stickers printed of the cover, like 3x3 in stickers, which at my gig last week, you know, I said in the microphone, I have a new record coming out, and I know it's not a children's birthday party, but I have stickers, and everybody wanted stickers. And you know, there it is, all the information on the sticker. Well, it said Curha on the sticker, but you know, pretty easy to figure out how to find that if you're interested in checking it out further. But something physical, actually. It's kind of like anything physical for people when they're in a live situation. They want a piece of it.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Have to think about it more and more, like nowadays. But, cool.
What does that mean?
Yeah, we'll see where it goes. You know, it's like strange. But cool, Curtis. Thanks for taking some of the time and sharing some of the thoughts, man. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Very, very pleasant talking to you, and enjoyed your questions.
Yeah, like it's I like now always, you know, I listen to your music, and now at least I get to explore and talk a little bit with you, and like with all these guys you play with, so it's fun. So.